Welcome to this episode of the Private Aviation Insider's Guide. I have on this podcast with me today a guy who has been flying the wings off of a G200, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Mark Rader works for a charter operator in Northern California. Mark, thanks so much for joining the show.
So happy to be here and join you, Rene.
Well, tell me a little bit about your operation. I know that you fly the G200 for charter, but I want to hear a little bit more about how much y'all are flying that aircraft, because I think that's significant.
Yeah, it's a 91-135 operation, but I'd say at this point in time, 90% of our flying is 135 charter. So it's fun because we get a lot of different people to fly around with their own personal stories, and it takes us to different locations so we don't end up doing the same routes all the time. We get to go to a lot of different airports, and in the month of July, we flew almost 200 hours on one single airplane. We typically fly, right now we used to have one G200, and we fly at about 1,000, we put 1,000 hours on it each year for the last few years. So it's one of the heavier flown G200s in the fleet.
Well, Mark, can you tell me a little bit about the performance of the aircraft? What makes it such a great charter aircraft? Talk about the range and the service ceiling and some runway limitations or benefits that you might have with the G200.
Yeah, it's a fun plane to fly. There are easier planes to fly. This one can be a bit trickier, a bit quirky on the ground, but it was originally, it's an Israeli-made jet through their program, and they started building these back in 1999, and then within 2 years Gulfstream bought it, and they changed it from the Galaxy 200 to the Gulfstream 200. But when I'm flying, most of the controllers still call us the Galaxy. Its performance, it's got two Pratt & Whitney engines that put out a little over 6,000 pounds of thrust each, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot. What really matters is what you can do with the airplane. So for instance, I had a trip a couple years ago with one of our regular clients, and we would fly him to Nashville a lot. And our boss wanted to make sure that we were able to get him back faster than he had hired two planes, our plane and a Citation 10. And so we flew him out to Nashville, and then on the way back, he decided to ride back in the Citation 10. So our boss is really concerned that the Citation 10, which we know is faster than a G200, would outperform us and get back faster. So myself and the other pilot, we paid off the line guys to delay the other jet, the Citation 10, so we'd get out of the ramp first. And then we found an altitude where we could actually go the fastest we could, which for a G200 has 0.85 Mach, and we know that a Citation 10 can outperform that. But we were able to, it was our Millennial Falcon Kessel run, and we were able to do that and beat the Citation 10. So the performance is great until you get high in the air. Once you get up to flight level, the ceiling's at 45,000, but rarely do you go that high. Usually we're flying at around 40,000, 41,000, and east-west coast flying. And when you get that high, the wings are not great. It's a bit thin in the air, so your performance is degraded. But on the sea level, for landing and takeoff, those engines are give you plenty of power. The one thing I can say about it is that it is some of the pilots that we have come through when they're not, they're just trying to learn how to fly it, can have a little bit of a challenge with how it can be kind of squirrely on the runway. It has a few. The brakes are really good. It stops really well, but the thrust reversers are not very good. I tell most of the pilots that you can deploy them, but don't use the thrust reverse. So I've had a few problems with guys that try to use them, and it causes a lot of problems.
Well, tell me more about that, because that could be concerning to someone who's thinking about buying a G200.
Well, you mentioned earlier about what was my worst or most dangerous flight, and I had a new pilot that wasn't new. He was older. He had a career flying in the Air Force and for United, but he didn't really, he'd been flying great, and he'd been on with us for a few months. And so I kind of relaxed, and we were landing in San Jose, which, plenty of runway there. And he touched down, real smooth, perfect landing. But he forgot about the TRs, went full thrust reverse on a good landing. And in less than a second, we were sideways, 90 degrees out from the runway with our momentum going down the runway. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I'm about to have my very first airplane crash or mishap. And I all of a sudden it was like a Christopher Nolan movie where time just stopped. And, you have those moments where everything happens at a super slow pace, even though it's just rushing by. And I basically shoved his hand out of full reverse and then jammed on the left rudder. And by some miracle of God, we didn't go off the runway, because I was looking at the runway line, boundary line, in the grass in front of me, 90 off from the runway. And the plane just popped right back, rolled down the runway. And I got to say, that really got my attention. I don't know how it was possible that we didn't crash that day, but I didn't let him fly that plane anymore after that. That was it for me.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's pull back from the adrenaline that I now have pumping thinking about that incident, and tell me a little bit more about the missions that you typically see flown in the aircraft. If a charter client's calling in, what trips do you say the G200 is perfect for that mission?
Yeah, it's really a coast to coast. The range is, in the books, the range is 3,400 nautical miles, or roughly 39,000 miles. And my longest trip in the airplane, I pretty much reached that. I flew a trip from Maui to Kansas City. It was about a 7-hour and 25-minute flight, and it was 3,349 nautical miles. So I was right at that max range. So it does do it. And I had gas to spare. It wasn't like I was landing on fumes. So it's considered a super mid-size aircraft, and it holds 8 people. Some versions, we had another airplane, another G200 that held 9 people. Most of the time, our passenger load is 2 to 4 people. It's pretty comfortable. We've occasionally had a full load, and that can get a little bit crowded with one divan and the rest of our seats. But often when we have a full load, we have some kids involved, and it kind of works out fine. I would say the mission is varied, where we have a lot of, we have our regular clients that we fly often to the same places. And then we have a lot of charter that comes and goes, but those are fun because you go to just wild different places. I have flown the G200 as far as Helsinki and Israel. We've had a few requests for over to New Zealand, but at the last moment they went with a larger airplane just for the comfort. But we can do all those missions if you're willing to stop. Typically we'll fly to Europe, and I can go from the West Coast to Europe with a one stop through Gander, or if it's summertime and the weather's good, I'll go up through Frobisher Bay on the top of the Hudson. So coming back with a little bit of headwind, we'll have to make it 2 stops on the way back. But it's very versatile. It's very efficient. The cost of flying it isn't bad at all compared to other airplanes. And so we have a good niche. It's a great charter jet for what we use it for.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about the fuel burn on the aircraft and about how much fuel you burn per hour on a typical trip, so that we can get kind of a reference point on what you said about the operating costs.
Yeah, the first hour you're going to burn about 2,000. You got a little bit of extra burn in the climb up, but after that, you're burning about 1,800 pounds total of fuel. So the plane holds 15,000 pounds, and like I said, you're pretty much at your max endurance time at a little bit over 7.5 hours. But most of our flights, again, our common route is going to be West Coast to East Coast. Often we fly to Teterboro, but we'll go up to New England a lot, and I'll sit down to Florida a lot, and DC. So a lot of the people we fly have, meetings and so forth in DC, and business in New York and Florida. So we do that a lot. And then we also get a lot of Hawaii flights, which again, it's about 5 hours out, 4.5 hours back. And we cover all the islands, and that's fun. Occasionally we'll have an empty leg out there where we go out and pick some up and bring them back. And so I've tried a few times to get my family to come on board on the empty leg. And usually what happens is they're all set to go, their bags are packed. And at the very last second, we fill it with a charter on the empty leg. But finally, after a few tries, I got my wife and our kids on board, and it was a lot of fun to fly them out to Hawaii. And then I flew back the next day by myself with the passengers, and they came back a couple days later commercial. So that was kind of a nice little perk on this job.
That is such a great benefit for flying corporate instead of flying commercial. I think that's a ton of fun. So you talked already about some special skills or a little bit of, a nice touch with the thrust reversers and being really aware of that and managing the aircraft on the ground. Great in the air, need to know what you're doing on the ground. Tell me about the pilot workload when you're flying the aircraft.
It's got a Collins Proline for your screens there and FMS. It's integrated. It's slightly intuitive. Could be a lot more intuitive, but it's a spacious cabin and spacious cockpit. I would say that the workload, is like most corporate jets. It's not that bad. When you're departure to landing, and I would say it's a pretty fun plane to fly. Yeah, I think really if you have good CRM, good crew concept, it makes it a pretty easy workload. So haven't really had any problems. Our plane, actually, some G200s come without auto throttle. Surprisingly, our plane has them, so that makes it a little bit easier. But for the most part, it kind of flies in the air like most corporate jets do. I've got a bunch of hours flying a G4 SP, and what's nice about that, like a true Gulfstream, is it has a real Gulfstream wing, so it gives you a slower approach speed, and that helps a lot. So you're not, going in some of these airports on a short field. Most of the time when we're looking at performance and landing, we usually set the bar at 5,000 feet. We'll go into places like Santa Monica when you could at 4,900 feet, and we still go into Carlsbad at 4,900 feet. But for the most part, that's kind of our threshold there. And for departures, if the runway is less than 5,000, you're not going to go too far because you don't have the runway length to carry enough fuel to go, more than say a couple hours. It does have a problem with on climb out performance. Second segment climb is a real restriction. So going out of Teterboro on a charter flight to the West Coast can be challenging in the summertime because of the heat and the loss of performance, or in the wintertime because of the longer flight time with the headwind. So you have to really work hard to, legally we use APG as performance calculator to get your numbers to work. And sometimes you'll land with a little less fuel if the weather's good at your destination, just so you can make it nonstop. Occasionally, we'll have to stop for fuel because we just can't make that distance due to the second segment climb restrictions on the G200.
Fair enough. Well, tell me a little bit more about the passenger experience on the G200. It's a super mid. It's pretty, you've got some elbow room in there, but tell me a little bit more about what that's like for the passengers.
Yeah, it's a really comfortable cabin. I'm 6'1", and I can stand up and still have room above my head. So it gives you a wider, taller cabin feel. So it feels a lot more spacious. You don't have to, bend over or scrouch or anything like that. So it has, full plush seats, and we just had our G200 refurbished on the inside redid everything. So it looks brand new again, which is nice because the plane we fly is, it's, let's see, about, I believe it's 12 years old. So it's they made a little over 251 of these G200s, and ours is one of the later models. So, but it's been around, for 20 years. So, but for a passenger, it's going to be every bit as comfortable as any other, mainstream G200 or mainstream Gulfstream plane. So, I think it's really best suited for 4 to 6 people, and then you feel spacious and not crowded. We on our G200, we always have a flight attendant, and our flight attendants are actually FAA approved trained flight attendants, not cabin attendants. So that gives you an extra margin of safety. Our philosophy is if you're flying without a flight attendant, then you're not being very safe because, you're always planning on the worst case scenario, and you'd want for your passengers someone that's trained in, in anything that could happen, whether it's a medical condition or you're having to, emergency land the airplane, and you want someone back there that's trained because the pilot's going to be tied up in the cockpit. So we always require that for our charter. And sometimes when it's just the owner by himself, and he doesn't want anybody in there, we'll just go without the flight attendant. But for charter, we always have one, and it really helps. And we were able to do a lot of specific catering towards the passengers. We just flew someone yesterday. It was their 29th wedding anniversary, and our flight attendant had the cabin decorated with, anniversary stuff and all that. And so you try to go the extra mile to make them feel just more special and make this a different experience than other experiences.
I love that. Well, speaking of great trips, it's always important to know about the luggage capacity of an aircraft. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. We've had some real challenges with people showing up with the entire house load of luggage to get on the airplane. And I'm like thinking, how are we ever going to get all that luggage in there? And it's not, the G200, the cargo section is not accessible to the cabin. So it holds roughly 2,000 pounds or 125 pounds per square foot. But it's a pretty tall cabin area. And so you can get quite a bit of luggage in there. We've always been able to pull it off. I'd say, we don't inspect every piece of luggage, but we do brief them on what they can and can't bring. And so my worst luggage experience was when I was flying a family to Alaska. And then, let's see, I didn't fly them up there. Another crew flew them up there, and then they forgot to take a box off. And then that plane went on to Hawaii. And it turned out the box of luggage that didn't get removed was fireworks, because it was 4th of July. And of course, you're not allowed to carry fireworks in an airplane. But no one knew that except for the passengers. And then the other crew had the box sent back on Delta to Anchorage. And then I came up there to pick them up, so we were feeling bad that their luggage had been lost temporarily until they got it back. But no one knew that it was actually fireworks, which you're not allowed to carry at all. So there is issues with hazmat that we adhere to. And I guess unless you inspect every luggage or trust your passengers for what they tell you is in there, there could be a few problems. But that would be my worst luggage story that I sort of wasn't involved with. So to make it up to them, I gave them a nice fly around Mount McKinley to make it up on the way back. So that was fun.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that it wasn't fireworks going off in the back of the plane. That would have been an even worse story, for sure. So tell me about the reliability of the G200. Obviously, if you flew 200 hours in July, it's a pretty reliable aircraft, but I want to hear from your perspective about AOGs and any chronic problems that you know about the aircraft that could be a deterrent for someone who's thinking about buying one.
Well, that's a great question, Rene. Reliability, I believe, has a lot to do with having a great maintenance department that stays ahead of it and is proactive, anticipates, and is really aware of what potential hazards or problems with the airplane maintenance-wise could be. The G200, typically, you'll see a lot of, most G200s go through your starter generator motors fairly quick. Those things fail a lot. There's been some chronic problems with APUs not giving the full lifespan on the APU. And also, we've had some problems with slats and flaps getting stuck, and we've gone through a few actuators on that. So and when I look around the fleet and talk to other pilots in training, they'll say the same thing. So those are typical problems. But reliability on the G200 for us has been extremely good. We've had a great dispatch rate. And I mean, we're flying back to back to back trips. Sometimes we'll do trips within a trip. And so you have to have good reliability so that you're not all of a sudden having to outsource somebody that, was counting on you to fly them. Even when we had our last son, my boss had me flying the next day because it was Thanksgiving. and they had no way to get to Jackson Hole. So even reliability from the crew standpoint was good in that sense. You know, I remember my last son Finn was born at 10 in the morning, and there I was in the afternoon flying to Jackson Hole. You know, but I got back when she was released from the hospital. So, you know, it is with sacrifices in charter communities. But yeah, we do a great job with reliability, and we have a great maintenance department that keeps us flying all the time and keeps us safe.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on with the details about the G200. Mark, thank you so much for telling us about this, about your experiences, about the performance of the aircraft, and really what a great platform the G200 is for coast to coast travel from California or even Kansas City and Hawaii as a city pair, which is pretty amazing. And then really appreciate you talking about the charter environment.